Hi, I'm Femi OK.
And I'm Omar Badar, and you're in the stream.
Today, transition in Uzbekistan after the death of that country's only leader, Islam Karimov. An interim president has been appointed.
So, will anything change for one of the world's most closed and corrupt societies?
I'm Phelim Kine from Human Rights Watch, and I'm in the stream.
Central Asia's most populous country has a new leader after more than 2 decades. Shavkat Mirziyoyev will inherit a nation with a very young population. Almost half are under the age of 25. Now that means that the only leader they have ever known is Islam Karimov, the recently deceased president who oversaw Uzbekistan's independence from the Soviet Union. The country is predominantly Muslim and it shares a small but very important border with Afghanistan. Now, Karimov often used the threat of what he called domestic terrorism to justify his brutal suppression of human rights and political opposition. Yet he was loved by his countrymen and looked at as a father figure. So, how have people been reacting online? Omar has more.
You know, Femi, one of the interesting things is that while Facebook and Twitter are available and allowed in the country, not many people use them and even fewer express political opinions on them. We see people conveying grief and affection for Karimov. Here's an image right here showing the pictures of him next to great Khans from the region. And we have also Babradzi over here who says, "We lost our father and our leader." Now here's an image of Karimov smiling down from heaven. And finally, it's probably one of my favorite. Here we have a son asking his father what war is, and the father responds, "I don't know, son, we live in Uzbekistan." Definitely my favorite. So, but what we actually don't see is criticism of the president. But we do have this tweet saying the world came to ignore the Andijan massacre. That's the disputed massacre that took place in 2005 in the eastern of the country. Now, after international condemnation of that incident, Karimov kicked out all foreign media and stopped engaging with the West.
So what legacy did Karimov leave his country and what change might new leadership bring? Here to help us discuss this, we're joined by Navbahor Imamova. She is a long-time correspondent with Voice of America's Uzbek service. Diorbek Mohamedlov is from Uzbekistan and joins us from Daejeon University, where he's currently studying. Sarah Kendzior is a journalist and a researcher on Uzbekistan. And also in the studio, Savanti Cornell is the director of Central Asia Caucasus Institute at Johns Hopkins University in the United States. It's good to have you here, everybody. Welcome. Let me just show you this picture of the interim president. And it was announced today. And Diorbek, when you look at this interim president, what do you feel emotionally? Do you feel like this could be the new great leader of Uzbekistan? What are your feelings?
I do think that he is going to follow the policy and everything good that Karimov, like Mr. Karimov, like our dear president, Mr. Karimov, used to have. So I am quite sure that we are going to continue on the peace and the development of our nation with this person.
What gives you the certainty?
Well, first of all, he got the experience. He was not just in the position of prime minister, but like he was re-elected as the prime minister like 5 times. And he's not just a person who came to the government, but he's also the person who always been close to Islam Karimov. So it's not just a person, but it's also a student. He's also a student of Islam Karimov. So I'm quite sure that he's going to follow the path that Islam Karimov created during those 25 years. So I'm quite sure that we are not going to have any panic and we are not going to have any terrorism or any kind of problems that are being mentioned in the media because of our president left us.
What a confident voice there, Sarah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I actually agree with him. I think it's very likely that Mirziyoyev is going to continue in the same tradition as Karimov. That tradition is an authoritarian tradition in which not just the president, but the security service apparatus maintains great control over the state. I think that if there is any kind of unrest or something like that, it's much more likely to come later on once he's formally established.
Right. And I see you nodding, Navbahor. Why are you nodding?
Because while I agree with both of them, I see a victor there when I look at the Mirziyoyev's picture. I think a lot of people did not expect that he would be the next guy. For years we debated who would be the next person. And A lot of people that I talked to in the highest echelons of the Uzbek government doubted that he would be the chosen one. And we're still not sure whether he was the chosen one, but he definitely outmaneuvered everyone. And he got the blessing of the National Security Service, which basically controls the country. And one thing about him is that he's not known. He's been there, yes. He's been the prime minister of Uzbekistan since 2003. We know his age, he's 58. We know that he was mentored by President Karimov. But a lot of people, including myself, we're not sure that he was mentored to be the president.
Yeah, but
so there is a victor there.
Yeah, we do have people who disagree with the way he was chosen, essentially. We have Shahida over here on Twitter who says this was a coup, the prime minister appointed as a temporary president. This is against the constitution. There is no constitutional provision for this, and the constitutional court is silent on this. Savanti, what do you think of somebody using the word coup to describe how the prime minister became to be enacted as president?
Well, you could call that if you want to. I think the reality in many countries in this part of the world is that informal power is more important than formal institutions. And in most of the successions that have happened, by the way, most of the successions have been quite orderly. But there's always been an attempt to follow as much as possible within the confines of that informal agreement that is being made between power brokers, the actual constitutional arrangements, but it's very seldom followed exactly to the very letter.
What do you think happened behind the scenes, Savanti?
Well, I mean, in Uzbekistan, we know that there are power brokers. Some of them are known. They are cabinet ministers. Others are from important people from a regional level, from the agricultural sector, from the extractive industries. There was a need for a candidate that was acceptable to the major power brokers, a compromise candidate, just like Karimov was 25 years ago to the major power brokers in Soviet Uzbekistan. And I would think that this choice may have been made long before Mr. Karimov died.
Really? See, I am wondering, because there didn't seem to be a succession plan, but Savanti is saying
there wasn't a public succession plan, but there were candidates people who had discussed as potential options, and he was one of them. So it's not an entirely surprising move. I mean, I think this is a very insular country. It's difficult for both people in Uzbekistan and outside Uzbekistan to detect what's going behind the scenes of elite conversations. But it is not a completely surprising move, I don't think.
Sure. Napoho?
There were two people whose names kept on coming up, right? It's Rustam Azimov, the deputy of the prime minister, and Shavkat Mirziyoyev. But a lot of people also talked about the third person who might have emerged from the shadows, someone who knew everything, someone that we never thought of, but someone, who had been in very close contact with Karimov and somebody that Karimov could really trust, someone who could continue Karimov's legacy, but also be able to maintain that intricate balance between, let's say, the semi-criminal business elites who control the country. And so a lot of us expected to see that third person, and obviously he's not there.
Sarah, there's a cartoon that you shared with us which kind of underlines the secrecy and also highlights the secrecy with which Uzbekistan operates under, or perhaps the limited information that people outside of Uzbekistan get. This cartoon shows Karimov on his deathbed. Is he really dead? Is he not dead? Can you talk us through the cartoon?
Yeah, I know that cartoon. That's from an opposition website on Facebook called KYRGYZ, which means We Are Not Afraid. I think it was originally from L2's. But yeah, that was in reference to the mystery surrounding Mr. Karimov's death. When it took place was likely well before it was announced. They were put in a bind because of the Independence Day holiday on September 1st. I think if that had not happened, they maybe would have covered things up a little bit longer. But because Mr. Karimov always came out to celebrate with the country and was the focal point of the celebration, they couldn't exactly keep what had happened to him under wraps. Then they, announced it formally on September 2nd, the day after the celebration was completed. And so that cartoon is in reference to those rumors and gossip.
Diobek, do you think that's a fair way to look at Uzbekistan as very secretive and not much information getting in or even getting out?
Well, there is a thing. It's not about getting our problems out, but it's Uzbek nation, it's Uzbek culture. So we are not really those people who are taking the problem out. We are just used to kind of keep the problem inside and solve it inside. We are not waiting for other people to come and help us, but we are trying to hold that problem inside. And even if commoners, are not telling anything about the problem, it does not mean that it's because of the democracy or it's because of the human rights, but it's just because of the fact that we respect our elderly and we respect those people who are in the government, and we think they know better what's going to
give us an
be
example?
better for the nation.
Do you want to give us an example of just keeping things to yourself? What would be a good example of that?
Oh, well, for example, even if it is, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not really sure if what you are saying is like the death of the president was kept secret or was not kept secret, like he died on 28th or 29th.
I'm thinking more of the concept, not about the death of the particular president, but the more the circulation of information, freedom of speech. And you're saying, well, the Uzbek way is not necessarily to shout about it, not to share it. Navbahor, do you agree with what Diobek is saying?
Of course not. I'm a journalist, you know. I want people to know as much as they can. I want people to do something, you know, with the information that they get. I think to, you know, single out Uzbekistan as a country where people don't really, you know, want to talk about is really unfair. Uzbeks want to share their issues. They want to talk about it, but there is no platform. There is no public debate. There is no culture of a public debate.
It's not really about this one.
No, but that does not mean that people don't want it. Just because people can't have it doesn't mean that they don't want it. I mean, look at what happened.
Why do you think that they can't have it? They can have it whenever they want to. They can have it whenever they want to.
As someone who spends a lot of time on social media, I see people discussing. People are learning to you know, exchange views with each other.
Even the social media, see, even if they are speaking, see. What you are saying is contradicting yourself. Even if they are discussing in the social media, it really means that they are discussing. They are sharing that problem. If it's called the freedom of speech, if they did not have any freedom of speech, they would be afraid of speaking out, even in social media. But even like there is a picture in the studio. If they show it later on, we are debating on this one as well. So I am a debater, and in the like a CT debate tournament, we have discussed it about those problems, and we really discussed it. And even the government organizations were looking at us and even interviewing us about what kind of like policies or what kind of problems we are discussing during the debate. And you know what's debate, so we are discussing.
So speaking of social media,
I mean, look at you.
Navbahor,
you are expressing yourself.
Hold tight for a moment. Speaking of social media, I think that's a really good cue to bring Omar back into the conversation. Omar, go ahead.
Sure, and we do have people online who are disputing how open the country is, but they do see an opportunity here. This is a comment here that we got from Steve in Kyrgyzstan. Check it out.
The death of Islam Karimov and this leadership change present a real opportunity for the international community to push for positive change in Uzbekistan. The United States and the European Union, the countries that say they've been promoting democracy for a long time in Uzbekistan, have a chance now to put their money where their mouth is and publicly articulate conditions for reform. That means they should push for the release of political prisoners, an end to torture, and for the Uzbek government to allow the UN, the Red Cross, journalists, NGOs, and other activists to do their jobs in the country.
So, Sarah, what do you think of the current state of openness in the country, and do you see this as an opportunity to see more opening up?
I mean, I think the current state of openness is evident by this panel, in which you have absolutely no one actually from Uzbekistan living in Uzbekistan on the panel, because somebody would never be allowed to be on a show like this. In terms of secrecy and openness for the future, I think we're to expect more of the same. I think Steve's recommendations are solid. I think it's very unlikely that they're going to be implemented by the government.
Let me show you something here. This is from the World Report 2012. This is from Human Rights Watch, Samvete. Uzbekistan's human rights record remains appalling, with no meaningful improvements in 2011. And then they were kind of kicked out and weren't able to kind of follow up on previous years. So what do you make of that? And often when people speak about Uzbekistan and the former President Karimov, they always talk about human rights abuses.
Well, I think we have a reality in which most of the people in the West who talk about Central Asia talk about human rights. And I think that's one of the problems why we can't affect the human rights situation in the country, because Western governments are not engaging with Central Asian and Caucasian leaders on the issues that matter to them. We only come there engaging with the issues that matter to us, and therefore they don't listen to us anymore.
What if we flip the script and the issues that matter to Uzbekistan, what would they be?
Well, I mean, I think the reality is that over many years, there was a kind of an informal agreement between the West and regional leaders, which was We want them to reform their countries. They want us to invest in their sovereignty and their security and in their economic development. But the US and Europe have really not been present in those areas in the past 6 to 8 to 10 years. And as you can see, the impact that the US and Europe are having in these countries today is minimal.
So you basically say you're calling out the outsiders as being hypocritical about the way they're treating Uzbekistan.
I'm not saying they're hypocritical. I'm saying that we have a situation where the people who engage in issues outside of human rights issues are not engaging with Uzbekistan anymore. And that means you have a monologue rather than a dialogue going on, and it's not being very helpful.
I mean, I think that that's accurate. There's a monologue going on. And again, I want to get back to my point that we don't have anyone on this panel who is in Uzbekistan. We don't know what people in Uzbekistan want. I mean, Navbahor is correct in that people do talk online, but those who are talking online often are people who are exiled from outside the country. People don't have the opportunity for self-determination.
You are not right here.
No, I'm sorry, but I am.
You are not right here. So why in that case, like, just sorry for disturbing you, but see, why in that case am I discussing on the social media or even on like on anything on the telephone or on everywhere? I am discussing with my friends who like all of them are in Uzbekistan, and I used to be in Uzbekistan. I used to discuss with that, and I already told you about the debates, public debates in the center of the city being held. And about the problems in Uzbekistan, about everything about in the Uzbekistan. So how, in that case, do you agree that
why is the government blocking the internet? Why is the government cutting off websites? Why are they not allowing Uzbeks abroad to interact with Uzbeks in Uzbekistan? I don't doubt at all the sincerity of your beliefs. I don't doubt at all that people are grieving and that they're sad. But I think if you were to express any kind of view that deviated from what the state wanted you to do, that view that would not circulate. It wouldn't be a debate. It would be a monological debate, a debate of people of like mind. I do believe that exists in Uzbekistan. I don't think there's much more room to go elsewhere.
So, Sarah, we do have people who echo your point of view here, like Khusrav, who says the authoritarian regime in Uzbekistan has restrained free speech and has wiped out opposition. People live in fear. But then you have people making a different point, like Marcin over here, who says Islam was a great leader despite the fact that his presidency was a little bit undemocratic and unfair. And we have Cyberdroid over here saying he is a prime example of the lesser of evils. Navbahor, I know you were trying to get in here, but I just want you to address specifically the idea that, even though things are bad, it could be worse, and having an authoritarian regime there is basically holding off things from completely falling apart. How do you respond to people who make that argument?
I want to go back to the point where, how much Uzbeks are willing to share. People are whispering, people are talking. They are exchanging views with each other. I wonder how many friends Diyorbek has who actually disagrees with him. Because, if you live in Uzbekistan, it's easier to agree with the government, of course. But if you don't disagree, you keep on, you don't necessarily share it in public. That's one point. Another point is that it is true that a lot of people in Uzbekistan actually, and I'm in conversation with a lot of people on a daily basis, they truly, genuinely believe that this is the best position that Uzbekistan can be at this point in history. This is the best deal that they have got. They realize that they have never had, experience with democracy. They don't know how to really, practice freedom if they were given it today. So they talk about this. No, we will get there, when we discuss what democracy is. But we're talking about the status quo. President Karimov, Islam Karimov, was the only politician in Uzbekistan for the past, quarter of a century. He's been the only spokesperson. He's been the only person who explains the policies. And by the way, he never gave any interviews for a very long time. So he never really asked questions. The only time he would talk to the world press was when he visited Moscow. That's where, you would have some press presence, and sometimes he would answer questions. But otherwise, we never really had a window to the government. I mean, I cover Uzbekistan and Central Asia from Washington. I get to interview the U.S. policymakers about what they're doing in the region, specifically what they're doing with Uzbekistan. But when I want to talk to the government of Uzbekistan,
so guess let me just.
People whisper to me.
So guess, let me just share this with you. Let me share this with you.
That doesn't mean that we don't know what's happening. But, people don't share because the only person
Navbahor, talking about sharing,
even the minister.
Share the conversation with me, Navbahor. Thank you. Have a look here at my laptop. This is the GDP real growth rate from 2013, 2014, 2015. 8%, 8.1%, 8%. This is pretty impressive. Diorbek, if you're thinking about the legacy of Karimov, is this part of it, a very strong economy?
Well, when you are saying about the economy, we are developing, so it's like, I will mention about the democracy as well here. So when you are talking about the intervening of the other nations, like the person from Kyrgyzstan said, so here about the economy, we are developing. So even though GDP is showing like it's dropping, but we will develop. So we are developing like step by step. This is the legacy. This is the real legacy of Islam Karimov. So while everyone, not everyone, but all the opposition expecting to having like the opposition is expecting us to have the revolution, but we don't want that revolution. That's why Islam Karimov was strict. Yes, we do agree he was strict, but he was strict for the necessity. So because of the fact that we need that not revolution but evolution. This is more important for us because of the fact that we need to develop step by step and the economy and the lives.
Diorbek, we do have a video comment that came to us from India of somebody who shares your view of the president's legacy. Check it out.
Initially, his Uzbek model of development was ridiculed by Western advisors. But if you look at Uzbekistan today, its economy has grown about 8-9% in the last decade or so. You know, his multi-vector foreign policy was termed not very reliable by Russians or Americans, but he was able to provide relatively independent foreign policy to Uzbekistan. Now the kind of stability he provided is at stake. So any wrong move by outside powers can destabilize not just Uzbekistan, but the entire region.
Savante, stability and human rights aside, rather democracy and human rights aside for a moment, do you think that stability is at stake moving forward? Is there a risk of things moving in a different direction on the part that people did think the country was successful on?
Well, obviously, any change in power at the highest level in regimes where the ultimate decision maker has a lot of influence, and I would say he's not the sole decision maker. He has to take other power brokers into account, but nevertheless, of course, the priorities of the next president will matter, and they may be different from the current president. That said, I would say that these countries are not newborns anymore. They're 25 years old. Uzbekistan has been around for 25 years. The foreign policy of a country like Uzbekistan was not just based on one man. There was a certain depth, an institutional and bureaucratic depth into this, a certain consensus based on Uzbek nationalism and on a very strong will to be independent. Few countries, if any, in the former Soviet Union have been able to really stick it to the Russians when they felt the need to the way the Uzbeks have, and I expect that will likely continue.
I'd like to interject for a second about both this issue and the economy issue. The reality of the economy in Uzbekistan is there are a few practices that we should note. One is migrant labor and a heavy dependence on Russian remittances. Uzbeks cannot find work in Uzbekistan, especially young Uzbeks, so they go to Russia and work as migrant laborers in very bad conditions, and that's also been affected by the currency crisis in Russia. The second is the forced labor industry, especially in the cotton fields, which has in the past employed children, now employs adults. Shavkat Mirziyoyev was one of the people who overlooked that industry. He was a key figure in it. I think it's really something where you see the economic and the human rights issues connected, and the fact that he was such a key player in that situation is a bad sign of things to come for Uzbekistan.
I'm just curious about two different thoughts about home. Navbahor and Diorbek, I just want to get those two dueling opinions about your country. Diorbek, are you optimistic about the future of your country in the last minute of the show? So make it brief.
So I am very, very optimistic about the future of our country, and it's not only about me, but it's like 90% of the younger generation is really optimistic about that.
All right, optimism from Diorbek. Navbahor, how do you feel about your country's future?
I'm neither optimistic or pessimistic. I really think that the country has a lot of work to do. This is a test. This is a real challenging times for the country. And ultimately, whatever change that happens in Uzbekistan will happen from within. So a lot rests on the shoulders of the citizens of Uzbekistan. One thing to add about the economy, the numbers.
It's in one sentence. It's one sentence, Navbahor, because we're right at the end of the show. Your one sentence is what?
I realize that, yes. The economic numbers are questionable, the ones that you were showing, because the source of that number is from the government, and the government gives the numbers to the World Bank, to the IMF.
Diorbek Mahmoudov and Sarah Kenziva and Savante Cornell, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. It continues online. #AJStream. Take care, everybody.